Question 4, and I call on the Honourable Member for Arbory, Castletown and Malew, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to ask the Minister for Infrastructure if we'll make a statement on the registration of vehicles arriving on Ireland.
Call on the Minister for Infrastructure to reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, all vehicles arriving into the island from other jurisdictions must be registered in accordance with the Licensing and Registration of Vehicles Regulations 2015. As soon as practicable after a vehicle enters the island, the owner must make an application to register it. There are some exceptions to this requirement in that short-term visitors to the island do not have to re-register their vehicles if they are not intending to remain for longer than 12 months. Residents must have their vehicles registered. Exception can be made where a specialist type of vehicle is being used and breaks down or is involved in an accident and an equivalent replacement cannot be sourced on island. In that case, a non-Manx registered vehicle may be used for up to a month without it being re-registered in order for a permanent replacement to be sourced or any necessary repairs carried out. Failure to register a vehicle on island is an offence, and the Department works in conjunction with its colleagues in the Isle of Man Constabulary in enforcing this. The Constabulary has specific seizure of vehicle powers which can be used if required. Once a vehicle is brought to the island on a permanent basis, it is not legal on Isle of Man roads unless it has been re-registered or is in the process of being re-registered. If an appointment for re-registration has been made for the vehicle, but the vehicle is awaiting a test, then the details of the appointment should be kept in the car to demonstrate to the police that the vehicle is being registered as soon as practical.
Supplementary question, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for that detailed answer. How are the delays caused by lockdown now being resolved, and how long will a vehicle owner booking an appointment today have to wait for their service to come through?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As the Honourable Member for Arbory, Castletown and Malew has intimated in his question, the COVID pandemic did cause a significant backlog in the operation of the Vehicle Test Centre, and that backlog still exists. Whilst the target waiting time is generally around about 2 weeks, and typically it's not significantly exceeded beyond 4 weeks, the current waiting time is around the 6-week mark. Potentially appointments can be available within a shorter period if they're taken up at the weekend, but for a Monday to Friday appointment, the current waiting time is 6 weeks. Where there are urgent needs, requirements can be made on request to fast-track an appointment.
Supplementary question, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for that detailed answer. How do the new registrations in the third quarter of 2020 compare with the figures in the third quarter of 2019?
Minister, do you have that information?
I do, thank you, Mr Speaker. In terms of registrations for this calendar year, from the 1st of January to the 30th of September, so far this year, there have been new vehicles registered totalling 352, which compared to 319 in the equivalent period of 2019. So that's an increase of 33, or around about 10%. In terms of imported vehicles or pre-owned vehicles, there have been 1,130 registered to date in this calendar year, compared to 1,245 in the equivalent period of last year.
Supplementary question, Mr Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the backlogs outlined by the Minister, will he now consider outsourcing these vehicle checks to commercial garages on the island to improve the service provided? Thank you.
Minister to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Honourable Member for Middle makes a relevant point in terms of how can we increase the capacity of the service, and the most effective and quickest way of doing that is simply to increase the resourcing of the test centre. Now that can be by recruitment, which is currently underway, but also through the flexible use of staff, and I've asked my officers to look at opportunities around the use of effectively bank staff, and also whether there are other people within the public service who have the requisite skills and experience to provide this service, and that is the way forward through the current peak that we have.
Supplementary question, Mr Hooper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for giving some of those numbers. It seems to me that I'm getting more and more comments from constituents about an apparent or noticeable increase in the number of UK registered vehicles on our roads. The numbers he's just given us don't reflect that. Does that perhaps indicate to the Minister that there are more cars out there that are not going through the registration process?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's difficult to be precise in terms of the number of non-Manx registered vehicles that are on the island, but anecdotally it would seem that there may have been an increase, and that potentially reflects the backlog over the COVID period. However, what I can say to the honourable member for Ramsey is that there has been some very collaborative working between the department and the Department for Home Affairs using the automated number plate recognition system, and 393 people have been caught without road tax using the department's ANPR enforcement. And it may well be that the public awareness of the use of these enforcement measures has prompted additional people to perhaps register their vehicle for testing, which may actually have magnified the length of the waiting list. Thank you.
Supplementary question, Ms Edge.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think I heard the Minister say that he agreed with the Honourable Member for Middle, Mr Shimmons, with regards to getting support from external garages. I'm just wondering if the Minister could comment as to why we're investing in such a large new facility, if the Minister is feeling there's another way of doing this.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think the Honourable Member for Onken must have misheard my response to the Honourable Member for Middle. I did not say that we were going to use private sector garages. What I said was that we would look at flexible resources, perhaps using bank staff or redeploying people with the requisite skills in terms of eliminating the backlog. The question of the replacement of the vehicle test centre is a strategic matter which is linked to some opportunities for a significant local employer to expand, and is a very positive step for the island going forward.
Supplementary question, Mrs Barber.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for talking with me about the vehicle testing centre. But one of the issues that's been raised with me is around businesses who sell cars, used cars, who bring cars into the island, who can't get them through the testing centre, and the impact that's having on their ability to run a small second-hand car business. And I'd just seek the Minister's assurance that he is committed to picking that up on behalf of those constituents, to look at not just for private car owners, but also for those businesses affected by this backlog.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Douglas East for the discussions we have had and the way she's raised this issue, which is a genuine issue for businesses operating in the car resale market. I would acknowledge that issue, and that it is having an impact on those businesses, and where those issues are significant, I would suggest that those particular businesses that are affected should contact the Vehicle Test Centre and actually make those concerns known. I would also encourage all businesses involved in this sector to actually contact the Vehicle Test Centre as soon as a vehicle arrives on the island to book in that car for a test. I understand there may be sometimes a reticence to do that until there's a purchaser for a vehicle found, but clearly if there is a waiting list for test, and that can be running alongside the process of selling the car, that is likely to expedite the end outcome.
Supplementary question, Mr Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I'm very interested in the Minister's comments earlier. Was any consideration given prior to recruiting more staff for the Vehicle Testing Centre to outsourcing this to commercial garages? Because actually many of these cars are imported by commercial garages, which are perfectly capable of carrying out these basic checks. This insistence on doing everything in-house It's just adding cost and delay to our taxpayers.
Minister to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I mean, the honourable member obviously has diagnosed the issue and has come up with his own identification of what the issue is and what the solution is. What we're talking about here is a backlog which has come from a particular impact, which is the COVID situation, combined with a relatively fixed capacity through the vehicle test centre. The recruitment is underway, and it's linked to a ongoing succession of member of staff in the vehicle test centre. So this is about a controlled response rather than a knee-jerk reaction, which says we fundamentally change the method of delivery of this service.
I've got Ms Edge, Mr Robert Shaw and Mr Moorhouse left on this one, and then I will move on. Ms Edge.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Just wonder if the Minister could advise what the daily capacity for tests is in the test centre, and also with regards to, he commented that the new building is a strategic asset. Can he confirm the date that the approval for the funding for that came to Tynwald?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we're getting a bit off the question here. This isn't a debate about the new vehicle test centre or the funding for that. And in terms of the precise capacity of the vehicle test centre, I'll quite happily advise the honourable member directly.
Supplementary question, Mr Robert Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In passing, I must express some amusement and enjoyment on the exchange between the honourable member for Arbory, Malew and Castletown, Mr Moorhouse, and the Minister in terms of him anticipating the question and providing a fulsome answer. Quite brilliant and fine piece of work it was. So perhaps he already knows the question I'm going to ask. So extra sensory perception is an
Minister to reply.
Based on the assumption that he doesn't know all the questions before we ask them, would the Minister please consider, and it follows the honourable member's question from Middle Mr Shimon, also for Onken Miss Edge, where he said there's a strategic reason, as I understood it, that we have to keep expanding the centre. Would he be kind enough to write to all members to explain to us why we can't examine this issue in more detail, and why continuing to ask government to do everything is actually the right strategic way forward? Would he be kind enough to consider that? Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Will the Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Just for clarification, and maybe I didn't articulate my response quite as precisely. The relocation of the vehicle test centre was described as strategic because it fits in with some key business in the private sector, their expansion plans for the island. So that's why the vehicle test centre has been relocated. In terms of the wider model of delivery of the service, which is the question that the honourable member is asking. As a relatively new minister, I'm very open to looking at different ways of delivery of services that are run by my department. I don't think that this is a top priority to resolve right now, other than to work through the backlog in a pragmatic way. However, these things should be looked at and considered as to validate whether we are doing things in the optimal way. A decision around whether something is done internally or is outsourced is a complex issue that merits full consideration, and there are many aspects of the public service that that comment would apply to. So in the longer term, I'm very open to looking at different ways of delivery, but I don't think there's a need to do it currently. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Final supplementary goes to the original question of Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Could the Minister provide some additional details about the monitoring of vehicles, and specifically the number caught without vehicle tax?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, very much. I don't have the precise information in terms of the number of vehicles that have been caught without tax. But what I would say to the honourable member is that this is a very important issue, and my department is strengthening its enforcement activities in conjunction with the constabulary, because in many cases vehicles that are not taxed also have other issues, whether it be lack of insurance, poor maintenance conditions, or even inappropriate driving. And I look forward to continuing to work with the constabulary to deliver better outcomes around all aspects of road safety and adherence to obligations to tax and insure the vehicles. And we need to eliminate this tendency to view car tax as an optional extra. It is not. It's as inappropriate as any other form of evasion of taxes or other responsibilities, and we do need to continue to improve our enforcement against it. Thank you.